Good morning, everyone. Bright and early here at 8:30. Bob, are you joining us? Good
Good
morning.
morning.
Well, we're going to get started right on time so we can get you out the door. We know you have plenty of things, real estating to be doing today. If I haven't met you guys, my name is Paige Martin, the founder of the Houston Properties team. I run the organization with my husband, Bob. And we're so excited to share our forecast with you. This is probably our favorite market update that we give every year. Um, and wanted to kind of chat just briefly before we get into it. Um, some of you guys know we just got back from our annual team trip. This year we went to Tulum and had 5 glorious days with amazing weather and masterminding with some other teams from around the country. I know by my tan that you think that that was really successful. But the thing about going to Tulum is that we came back on Monday. And I don't know about you guys, but remember that snowpocalypse that happened on Tuesday? Well, we flew in at 6 p.m. and I discovered that our pantry was completely empty. And I had this moment of panic where I said, "Oh my lordy, I am not prepared." Have any of you ever had that moment in real estate where you go, "Oh my God, I am not prepared"? So hopefully today, what we're going to give you is this opportunity to start the year off where you are prepared with some kind of focus of what to answer when your clients say, "Hey, what's the year going to look like?" We are firm believers that success is when preparation meets opportunities. Abe Lincoln says it that if he had 8 hours to chop down a tree, he'd spend 6 hours sharpening his knife. So thank you guys for sharpening your knife today with us. And with that, Bob, you want to kick us off?
It is. We will also leave a couple minutes for questions and answers at the end. As a classically trained economist, this is one of my favorite presentations and studies during the year. And I know that means that I will talk fast. When I talk fast, please don't be shy about adding questions in, and we will be able to cover them at the end or send more follow-up material.
Yeah, if we don't get to all the questions in the Q&A, we will certainly circle back with you after.
Okay, so 3 quick things to see here at 8:30 on Friday. How well you know your numbers from last year. Question number 1, and you're trying to figure out if this is a truth or a lie, which is a fun game that we played in Tulum last week. Question number 1 is, last year, the median age of first-time buyers rose to an all-time high of 38 years old. Question number 2, the number of luxury Houston home sales, those defined by $1 million or more, increased by 65% in 2024 compared to December 2023. And the last one is that baby boomers account for 25% of home sellers last year, making them the second largest generational groups. I'm going to give you a moment to spot which of the two are true and which of the third one is not. These are the answers. So yes, last year, 38 years old was the median age of the first-time home buyer. One of the things to consider, and I think it is important for this year, and we'll get into some of the data on the theme, is that you want to consider how that affects the conversations that you're having with 20 and 30-year-old about how to make sure that they're prepared to buy a house and the benefit it gives. Number 2, luxury market. We're going to talk about this a lot. 65% increase in home sales over $1 million is enormous. The last part is false because baby boomers actually accounted for 45% of all home sales last year. And more than anything else, it gives you a thought of how are you able to guide the baby boomers intelligently and effectively in a smart downsize. Two stories, again, that we'll go through. And again, we're going to go through a lot of numbers. We're going to go through a lot of graphs. But these are two stories to keep in mind as we go through everything. The first one is a really simple graph. It's a really simple story. This is a story, and this is from the last few years and for today, that is a story about money. And fundamentally is a story about the government and the government's money. And where this story begins for us is if you think back to 2000, right? Some of you may have been a little younger at the time and not in real estate. But if you remember what was going on around 2000 is that there was this enormous boom in the late 90s around dot-coms. And then there was this incredible bust, right? The technology industry was meeting its cliff. And if you look at that blue line from about 2000 going down, what the government decided to do at that point in time is to lower rates to spur the economy out of that bust. And one of the things that was really interesting, again, this is a story about money, when the government lowered rates, what they did is they created a housing market growth, which made it really easy for anybody to get a loan. And a lot of people got loans, and it created the housing crisis. And in the housing crisis, we had an issue. And so the government did what they did right at the start of the gray line, which is they gave away more free money. And by giving away more free money and making it easier for people to get money, they created another incredible run. The biggest thing is the red line, which is the amount of debt that the government's created. And I know nobody really understands, right? What does $36 trillion mean?
Nobody knows. It starts with a T. Who knows?
But here's how I want you to think about it. And again, this is just since 2000. So when you're driving around the streets of Houston and you're caught in gridlock and traffic, you see every Houstonian out there. And some of them have their blinkers and some of them don't. And some of them run red lights and some of them don't. But in total, there's about 2.3 million Houstonians. And so from just 2000 to the end, where we are right now in 2025, it's just the red line. Effectively, what the US government did is for every single Houstonian, they gave them $13.1 million.
Woo.
That's the amount of growth in the red line, right? Again, this is a story about money. So imagine every person that you see, homeless people, CEOs, everyone in between, the government gave them $13.1 million in just the last 20 years. It's enormous. In addition, by making rates really, really cheap, it created the housing boom that many of us have lived through in the last few years, and ultimately what we're leading into in the next year in our main prediction. The other story not to lose sight of is that Houston overall has been a great real estate investment over time. Fundamentally, Houston's been growing jobs. Fundamentally, Houston has been developing as a city, and fundamentally, more and more people are moving to the city. About every year, the real estate market or prices have appreciated for the long term about 3 to 4%. And the story or the narrative of people who buy smart, zoned to good schools, good houses, avoiding the 9 kisses of death, have done very, very well in the long term. And we believe that that story is going to continue despite the noise that you're hearing in the short-term market.
And we have a specific graph that really highlights how important it is to help your clients buy right, and because the delta between buying right and buying wrong is pretty significant.
So again, story number 1, it's about the money and the amount of money the government's giving away. Story number 2, Houston fundamentally has been a good real estate market. So 2024, key lessons in review. We made 6 predictions last year at this time. Number 1, we said Houston will end 2024 with its 3rd to 5th best real estate market in history. Last year ended with our 5th best real estate market in history.
Just barely got that one right, Bob.
Barely got that one right. Next one is we said we'll outperform the nation due to local job growth. And we did. Houston added about 60,000 jobs, and our sales volume eclipsed the average for the nation. Number 3 is we said the anticipated election season, we didn't forecast quite how messy it would get, But we said it may temporarily accelerate real estate sales. Many of you saw, many of your clients saw, from late August to November 2nd, it absolutely was slower than average. And then there was a huge pop in December.
And also don't forget that we were coming off the hurricane from July.
And the dredger, which was a big impact, and we'll get into that in a second. Also, we said mortgage rates would decline, but would remain around 6% because the Fed would lower rates 2 to 4 times. While the Fed did lower rates 3 times, we got that one wrong, because what fundamentally happened is that the spread, or the amount of money that holders required for mortgages, went up. So rates actually went up even though inflation declined. We said housing inventory will remain low, and we technically remain in a seller's market. That's also true. And we said home prices would rise slightly and be consistent with the 2022 to 23 pricing. And what happened is that prices rose 1.5%. Pretty darn consistent. One of the biggest things to see, and again, this gives a foundation for where we're going, is that home sales was our 5th best number of sales in history. If one of the things also to notice on this graph that's a big deal is the gray line versus the blue line. The blue bars show growth. The gray lines show where there has been sales less than the prior peak. We don't know how long sales are, quote unquote, going to be down since 2021. But if you look at the trend line that we have from 2007 to 2011, right, it took till the 6th year before home sales eclipsed the volume that we had in 2006. Mm-hmm. When we think about the market, if that trend line holds true, it would take until 2027 before we were able to eclipse the sales volumes that we had in 2021. Mm-hmm. And again, remember, the main reason is because it's a story about money. Mm-hmm. Money right now costs 7%, which is very different than the 19, 20, 21 timeframe where money would cost 2 to 3%.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And the red line there, just so if you're tracking this graph, because I think this is a very powerful, significant graph. And Bob, I love that you pointed out the light blue, because that's exactly what I have in my notes, is that is the big takeaway from this graph. When you look at down years, it doesn't immediately pop back. It does take several years for us to grow. So for our team last year, when we said, hey, it's going to be a tough year, you all understood that. And we said the same thing for this year, that this year's probably going to look a lot like what last year did, based on historical trends of what happened through the housing recession. The red line, if you're following, Bob, if we go back quickly, is just to show you the marker for 2024 on the far right-hand side of the graph. If you trace that back, we were just slightly under what home sales, the number of home sales were in 2019. So if you were in the business then, last year, 2024, should have felt a lot like your business in 2019. Not that any of us can remember that far back, because that was a COVID ago, but that's how it tracked out.
Although not all months last year were equal. And again, that was one of the big things in the summer, especially June. There were a lot of storms. August through November struggled due to the fear, uncertainty, and doubt around the presidential election. And then December, there was quite a large pop as some of the buyers and sellers had moved off the waiting list and had moved into action.
And I know this grid can be a little hard to read, at least it is for me. I'm not the economist in the household. So the light green and the gray, those are your COVID years. So when you're looking at those, you go, wow, those are really high. Well, yeah, those were COVID. Last year is yellow. And the black at the far side, or the navy, is the beginning of January. That's low because we haven't finished the complete month of January. So as these build out, this will grow. But please notice the seasonality of our business, right? You can see that we are back to a seasonality, which we didn't really have in COVID, because COVID was like everything. August and September, people were still doing stuff because they weren't going anywhere. And now we're back to life. So being extremely active and understanding where your business plans need to be now to prepare you for the spring and early summer is really critical, because you're going to see typically the back end of our summer starts to slide.
This graph is also interesting. First, please notice the red line. The red line is the mortgage rate, again, the cost of money. And even though inflation slowed a lot in 2024, mortgage rates remained high because, again, on fear, uncertainty, and doubt of what may come out of Washington, D.C. One of the things to note here is that 2024 prices, again, moved up about 1.5%, or about the rate of inflation as compared to 2023, but 2022 was still the high water mark. Again, we're only talking about a couple percent, but you can see, again, over time, Houston real estate has been quite a good investment.
Can I hold real quick on this slide, Bob? Because I really want you guys to take this to heart. I have a lot of clients who say, I'm waiting until prices decline. I'm waiting for the market to crash. Bob, can you show me on this graph where we have ever had a dramatic crash of prices since 2006?
That's exactly right. And then again, that goes back to the second story. Houston has been a good real estate market over time, predominantly because 50 to 150,000 people move into the city every year.
So it doesn't mean you might not give a little bit back, like 2008 to 2009, you saw an adjustment. You see an adjustment 2022 to 2023. There are adjustments 2017 to 2018, small, but there is not a big dip in overall home prices in Houston, which is a little bit different than some of the other markets that are more speculative.
More boom and bust.
Yeah.
This graph, again, can seem a little bit of confusing at first glance, but let me tell you what the narrative is. So every day we track 134 different Houston neighborhoods. And last year, 108 of the 134 neighborhoods had over 100 sales units. That's what we're going to call statistically significant. What was interesting, this is the bar graph on the left, is that the average price of those 108 neighborhoods, the statistically significant ones, was $407,000. We then looked at the data and we said, okay, a number of these neighborhoods actually declined in value, right? About a quarter of the total neighborhoods declined in value. What was interesting is that their average sale price was lower than average, about $375,000. But here's what was really interesting. The neighborhoods that experienced over 10% growth in sales prices, right? Areas that made effectively the homeowners the most amount of money, were areas that tended to be wealthier, and they had an average sales price of $559,000. Again, the big thing to remember of the story about money is when it's expensive to have to get money, it especially impacts people who have a difficult time collecting money, right? Not part of their job, not part of their portfolio. By contrast, those people who have a lot of money, especially in the stock market, they tend to do better. And we're seeing the segmentation of markets and areas based upon wealthy or non-wealthy areas. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in our predictions.
Real quick on my takeaway on this slide, which I think is so critical for all of us to understand. This is the slide that is truly about why it's important for you to help your clients make wise decisions, right? Of the three categories, where would you want your clients to be? Right? You'd want them to be at average or above. You certainly wouldn't want them to be in a declining situation. Now, they may choose that. Bob and I certainly did. We lived in a neighborhood where things declined for 10 years. That was a lifestyle choice that we chose to make, but we knew that going in. How sad would you feel if you had clients that chose an area and didn't know it was declining because you didn't take the time to do the research to help them make wise decisions? That is why we have these predictions and why statistics is so important in what we do.
Here are 7 key predictions for 2025. Number 1, and this is our big overarching theme, is that we expect 2025 to look very similar to last year. Specifically, we think it will be slightly better because there is no presidential election, and in 9 of the last or post 9 of the last 11 presidential markets, the spring benefited from more housing activity.
And that is for twofold. One, because people, whether they like the results or not, the results are in and they can move forward with their life. My comment on this slide is, if you liked your business last year and thought it was a great year, keep doing what you're doing. And if you didn't like your business last year, my question and challenge to you is what needs to change in you or your business to have different results? Because some people had their best year ever last year.
Notice the big thing is we're not predicting anything close to the levels of 2021, 2020, or 2022. Fundamentally, again, back to the story of money, mortgage rates are high. There's a lock-in effect. About 65% of people have mortgage rates under 5%. And most of the moves are either vitamin or aspirin moves. Vitamin move babies, things that are exciting. Aspirin moves are death, divorce, things that require an aspirin. Number two, we believe Houston's economy will continue to grow. Specifically, the forecast is about 75,000 additional new jobs coming into the Houston MSA. That should benefit our major employment hubs, notably around healthcare, construction, energy, professional services, and technology. That's where most of the jobs are expected to come, and we believe that most of the areas around those major job centers will continue to benefit.
Wait, Bob, I got something for you. But no, go back one. This scary picture. I know everybody's real excited for us to talk politics. The opposite of pro is con, right? Right, Bob?
Right.
Yes. Yeah. So the opposite of progress is Congress.
That's funny. I haven't heard that one before. And again, this is the big story as it comes back to money. Right now, the national average 30-year fixed mortgage is 7.23%, right? When rates are above 7, it's definitely had a damper on home buyers and sellers. We believe going forward is that there will be a tremendous amount of uncertainty that comes out of Washington, D.C. And even though we expect inflation will come down, we do not expect mortgage rates will come down because of that fear and uncertainty. And ultimately, the market right now is about 30% of cash buyers. We expect that to stay the same, but we expect rates to stay higher, even if the Fed cuts rates 1 or 2 times this year. Here's one of the biggest things, and I'm just going to give a stat and then Paige is going to tell the story. The S&P 500 did something that it's only done 4 times in the last 96 years. Again, it's done something it's only done 4 times in the last 96 years. And that's have 2 back-to-back market years over 20%. The wealth effect that creates is enormous. And again, let me just give you one example when you see the size of the dollars. You assume that you're working with an executive at one of the large companies. They've got a total stock portfolio of, say, $10 million. In 2023, the benefit, if that was in the S&P 500, was $2.4 million. And in 2024, the benefit of that was $2.85 million because of the value of compound interest. And that's fundamentally why the luxury real estate market has been up, and we believe it will continue to go up next year.
So I like to say it a different way. Most of us, we simply rely on our job for income, right? That is how we make money and how we spend money. We have one source of that. For folks in the luxury market, they typically have 2 sources of income. 1, the job that pays them, whatever that is, and 2 is their portfolio. And the portfolio is generating enough wealth that they essentially get the benefit of 2 jobs coming in, right? So the reason why that this market has outperformed what it normally does is not only because there's 2 jobs coming in, 2 incomes coming in to be able to allow this, but they're less sensitive to interest rates. Where those of us that typically don't have that portfolio, we are more sensitive and reliable on what that happens. Quickly, statistically speaking, the luxury market in Houston increased 10% over this time overall for the year, and it makes up 16% of the Houston market. Now, that means There's 84% of the market that doesn't qualify in luxury. So most of Houston still sits outside of that luxury camp, but that is certainly growth for us. And we have seen significant growth in the over $10 million in sales than we ever have seen in the history of Houston.
We also believe that there's going to be a big push for suburban growth. Notably, over 100,000 people are moving to the city every year. About 2/3 are choosing the suburbs. When we send out the article, we have some specific predictions on which cities we think will benefit the most in 2025. Related to that, investors, we think that for most investors that they'll continue to focus on rental opportunities. Again, going back, first-time homebuyer age was 38. That is the largest it's ever been in history. It means that a lot of people are not able to afford buying a home through a combination of the down payment and the cost of money. We've also seen a lot of increase in hard money lending. Specifically, we think that those trends are going to continue. Number 7, again, this is a statistic that I think is very important for everyone here. Historically, a balanced market has been between 5 to 7 months of inventory. That means if nothing new came on the market, it would take 5 to 7 months to sell everything out. Between 2017 and 2019 in Houston, those numbers were between 3.2 and 3.5 months. During COVID, it sold to one of the best sellers market in history at about 1.4 to 1.8 months of inventory. December, it was a high at any point since 2017 with 4 months of inventory. Our specific forecast is that it will be higher than that this year, reaching specifically at or above 4.5 months of inventory.
So all of you who had clients have been crying, I can't find a house. Those buyers have never had better inventory than they've had before.
Paige, I know again with some of the data, a number of people are asking the question is right, how do I use this data? How do I use this data to help my clients?
Yeah, so in the 4 minutes we have left, those of you on our team, you hear us say this a lot. Real estate is a niche business. What we have talked about is sort of how we see the overall Houston market. But if I walked into Target and said, why are those jeans not on sale? Because Old Navy had them for sale across the street. Those are 2 different stores, right? The same exist with neighborhoods. And so when we talk about the overall arching themes, make sure that you are really guiding your clients to understand that the story that they may hear from Cypress may not apply to Sugarland. And the story you hear in Sugarland may not apply to West U or Memorial, because each of those are specific niche markets, and understanding what that means is incredibly important. So, quick strategies for buyers. I think the most important thing that you have to really get clear is prioritize what matters most: location, home features, price, or timing. And then reevaluate that pretty often, because right, we all know that just because we started out with location is most important, by the time we get into this, we might figure out that timing actually is the driver. Of the 100 neighborhoods we track, 33 of those had price declines last year, despite the overall Houston market being 1.5% up on sales. So, right, if you're in that 33, those 33, you want to be guiding your clients to make sure that they understand what decisions that they're making. More inventory, less competition for your buyers should mean better terms, right? That's just pretty natural. Make sure that you're not saying things like you should make a full priced offer in an area where it's $50,000 overpriced and been on the market 365 days. That wouldn't be what's best for your clients. The other piece here, I think for buyers, you need to get lenders, plural, multiple lenders who can help you out in tricky situations. We are finding that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are tightening up on some things, and that's changing pretty frequently. And so having multiple lenders that can deal in specific scenarios is going to be key. For your sellers, I want you to ask them 2 important questions. When do you want to sell by? And what happens if that doesn't happen? Because if your seller says, I need to sell by May, then what are the things that you need to be doing now to help that happen? we see that sometimes we're allowing our clients to make decisions, which they have the right to make those decisions, but we're not giving them the right advice and opinions to meet their goals. So ensuring they understand the ramifications of their decisions, such as aspirational pricing, right? I'm going to price high. If I'm in one of those 33 neighborhoods, what's the likelihood that I'm going to be successful in May? Probably tough. Condos, especially for condo sellers, make sure that you have multiple lenders that can help them. We're at 9 o'clock, so I want to wrap this up. We're seeing some issues coming along with the condo associations not having enough money in their budgets to satisfy lender requirements. And the best deals, new construction, builder incentives, mortgage rate buy downs, design upgrades, special financing, all of that helps with affordability for your clients.
If there are any other questions that you are having trouble answering from your clients, please send us an email. We have our next webinar in the series on February 6th at 8:30.
For those of you on our team, you should have these on your calendar, but this is sort of what we're looking at for January, February, and the beginning of March. So we've got a really active schedule here this spring.
Fantastic. And I see we have a couple questions that are coming in. This is a link to register for our next webinar, and we'll be able to go for a few questions right now. Yolanda, first off, thank you for your question. She specifically sent in a link to one of Donald Trump's new executive orders that came out this week. It came in
that's gonna be fun.
from a client and said, is this Inflation Reduction Act repeal supposed to have a change in rates?
Good question.
Excellent question. As again, I know that there's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt around Washington, D.C. I'm going to start with this, that I just finished a book, the biography of Andrew Carnegie. And one of the things that was the most helpful about that book and how it relates to your question was reviewing in history how much presidents about 125 years ago were vilified as radicals, making emotional decisions, running our country into the wrong direction. This was all around the time when the United States was getting the Philippines from Spain. One of the things that we believe is that the beauty of the US system is that we have checks and balances in our government, executive branch, legislative branch, judicial branch. It is not new that there has been corruption and problems in Congress. And it is not new that we've had quote unquote madmen, as Teddy Roosevelt was described, in the executive branch. One of the big things that you're seeing in the news cycle, again, it's easier to be in the news cycle now, is the series of executive orders that the president has recently signed. Most of those, again, have very limited scope and power. Most of them are for noise, because the way that the government is set up is that there's a judicial branch and a legislative branch. Fundamentally, again, when we get back to the story, we don't believe that many of these executive orders or these activities are going to have a huge impact on the cost of money. Because again, remember, that is the story, right? What is the cost of money over time? We do believe that the government will continue to print money like it has been over the last 25 years. We think that that will benefit assets, right? Stock market and fundamentally house prices. But we do not expect that the executive branch or the president is going to be successful in lowering rates in the near term, because the market is larger than any one individual. That's our forecast.
All right. We're just right here at time. I know we have a couple of other questions. We will get those answers back to you. But thank you guys for spending your Friday morning with us. We know that there are many other places you could have had coffee, and you chose to sit here on Zoom with us. So we will see you next time.